All right, Oliver. Well, thanks again for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
We're noticing a problem in business, Oliver. Businesses are going two separate ways right now, realism and idealism. If you don't know which one you're following, things can get really confusing for you and for the people around you.
Hmm.
Um, and if trust comes from consistency, like culture, then your consistent choice, whether you choose realism or idealism, puts teams on the same page, or it can divide teams when you don't define those things. So we're here to answer those questions, the questions every business leader should be asking at a time like this, which is, am I a realist? And what does that mean? Or am I an idealist? And we're going to talk about what those things have to do with branding, marketing, culture, and community to give you a more realistic pattern for the brand and culture of your business. And um, Oliver could ask you for a brief introduction.
Yeah, sure. That sounds very interesting topic to start with for sure. So yeah, obviously I'm Oliver. I'm a community builder. What that really means in layman's terms is just I try to find the optimum way for all of an organization's stakeholders to work together. So that includes the employees, the board, the executive team, um, all of their customers, regulators, everybody who's involved in an organization, how they should work together to be optimized for the organization's benefit in the nutshell.
Good, good. I'm Chris Stadler, formerly a COO and at a branding agency, university lecturer in brand strategy, and a fractional CMO for realistic companies. We're going to talk about branding and leadership, right, Oliver?
Yeah, sure.
Can you frame it up? Maybe talk about the roots of how we think about this from a Thomist perspective, maybe.
Okay, well, I would start by saying I'll try my best. I'm not a Thomist. I try my best to leverage his teachings for the benefit of what I'm doing. And the reason being is because I would consider myself to be a realist, like most people would consider themselves to be a realist. But when it comes to actually implementing realism, you need some kind of benchmark, some kind of lens to look at what realism is. And I found that the teachings of Thomas Aquinas do that best. I went through a process of trying to figure out who does that the best. And you could even Google this, and they come up with some names. Or you could use an LLM. That's sometimes actually even better. Sometimes depends if it's hallucinating or not. The names that typically come up are Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Immanuel Kant, but they're all very different. And to be a realist, you'd have to try to find an objective truth, which means narrowing things down. And I went through a process of this, and I found out that it was Aquinas. And I found also quite interestingly that because his writings are so extensive and so long and so thorough and exhaustive, you could take most of his teachings and apply them to pretty much almost anything to assess or benchmark how realistic those things are. That could range from a product to an organization, to an idea, to a framework. And obviously you could apply it to branding as well. You could apply it to the qualities of leadership, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So of course, Aquinas never spoke about branding specifically. It's kind of a little bit after his time. But and maybe you'd be able to help a little bit more here because it's not really my specialist area, branding, and it's more like your area. But as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but branding is very much associated with culture. In other words, it could even be synonymous with culture. And would I be right in saying that it's the story that an organization tells itself and other people?
Yeah, I would say if done properly, that would be a way to describe it. I think done improperly, it's a label. You're trying to I think there are some people who are very good at corporate branding where they they're making something that they see out in the world, and they're saying, okay, well there's the opportunity. Here's where we fit, but it's very much responsive. It's very much feels way more political. It feels way more like we're going to try to be something that people want, within bounds. I think of Coca-Cola, they're never not going to be a, Coca-Cola, right? But they're going to flex and bend. And, there's this classic idea that we had when I was younger for Coca-Cola, and it probably has that still, but it's not based in realism. It's not based on those values of realism. It's with corporations, they're a little more, how do we win today? Because we need to impress people today. And today people want to hear this, right? Today the religion is this, you know,
Yeah.
today the cultural,
Zeitgeist.
milieu, the zeitgeist, that's a better word. The zeitgeist is this, right?
Yeah.
So the spirit of the age. And so, but done properly, what branding does is says what's real about the organization, what's real about our values, what do we stand for? Are we willing to stand for something? And so it tends to benefit brands. I think usually smaller brands because they're not public brands, publicly traded, and have all those pressures. They're able to be themselves. They're able to build how they want to build. They're able to live out their values in real life. And so by defining those things accurately, which it takes some skill, but the skill's out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're basically creating, hey, this is the shorthand for our culture. This is the story of our culture, kind of like how you said.
Well, what do you think about this idea? I mean, what you mentioned earlier said, it's about saying we're going to be something that people want and that can change over time, depending on the zeitgeist or whatever's fashionable. Do you think it's a mistake to keep changing to what people want?
Well, I'll tell you the practical thing, the practical problem I see with that, and then I'll ask you maybe a question about that. The problem I see is that if you're not anchored to something timeless and transcendent, then if you don't know that there's something bigger than us, then branding really just becomes this thing. Have you ever worked for a company where you felt like they want you to have values, but really they're values that only benefit them, right? It's
Yes.
like, well, hard work. We want, we're not here for just 40 hours. That's lame. We're better than that, and they try to involve you in this culture where, but ultimately it just benefits them. It's like, oh, we don't even put overtime on our time card, like we're that good, and it's like, yeah, okay, that I could see how you would want that CEO of the company. And I think that's what it sounds like when values aren't transcendent, it can start to feel like, well, that's kind of just what you want, right? That's not something that I can resonate with. Whereas when values are transcendent and they are true, now you have something that can grow over time. It's future proof, which is one of the biggest operational goals I think we have with the company that we want to grow. Is it future proof? And we're always setting up data, setting up processes and policies so they'll be future proof, right? Easily usable, easily understandable, and so people know what to do with them, and so we can fulfill our brand promise. And so, but if we're not realistic about things, then we end up slapping on terms like, diversity, when we really don't know if diversity is good or not. Like, is it good or not? Who says, right? Does it help our clients even? Is it even true for us, right? And so I think that from a functional standpoint, and I'd love to hear how you would translate that into kind of a, like, would you say that also has to do with right and wrong? Like, if I'm talking about the utilitarian value of having, I'm equivocating, the utilitarian use of having values that are real. How would you have an angle on that wouldn't be so utilitarian, but maybe a little more, right and wrong? Like, is there a better way to think about that?
Yeah, I just think that when we have conversations like this, which are very good and they're necessary, we just keep coming to the same point, which is truth objective or is it subjective? Is it something that we construct together to create, or is it something that we uncover and it's always been there? And you used the word just a couple of minutes ago. You used the word transcendent. We have to really ask ourselves, is the transcendent objective or not? Does it change? Is it like the laws of physics, for example, or is it not? Does what's good and what's bad change over time, or doesn't it? Um, I'm in the camp which says that it doesn't change, but I know I'm in a minority, and it's more fashionable to say it changes because it's kind of like, cool, man. Anything can be anything. And I understand the appeal of that because it feels liberating and it feels like you can just choose what you want to do and you can feel free and finally unrestricted by the shackles of life and all that. And, it opens up huge vistas of opportunity and innovation and all these. It's very seductive. And I can completely understand why people do it. But I do think it comes with some downsides. If we consider that we just want to appeal to the masses all the time, we kind of lose ourselves in that process. And I find that the best examples of organizations and how they brand themselves are those that just stick to their guns no matter what happens. And I find that those organizations which don't do that, and I could reel off a couple of examples, maybe Jaguar would be one, or Target, or Walmart, or Bud Light, who have kind of lost that initial appeal. The reason why they were so successful. Jeep, another one. Another reason why they were so successful in the first place is because they hit on something true, and then because of other pressures, whether social or economic or whatever, they changed, and they lost everything because they just aligned. Well, they didn't lose completely, but they definitely took a hit. And I think that, reality costs, it pays. You have to stick to it, even despite all the pressures. And I would just say that I think that that's, maybe I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think that
I like.
it's important to stick to,
Yeah, I like where you're going because I do think, and you asked a really interesting question, which I always assumed. I just assumed that transcendence is static. It's not something that's going to change over time.
Yeah.
But it's probably because I was raised that way, because the Christian God is static. He brags about never changing. He's like, this is,
Yeah.
I am reliable. I am like the laws of physics. I am reliable, right? This is the God that I see as kind of the, he is transcendent. And so I guess I've always just assumed that. But I also think that, going to your last comment, when I think of people with a backbone, I think of people those are the people I respect.
Yeah.
They're the people who think through things, and they're not the people who bow to pressure.
Yeah.
Because they know what they're about, and they maintain their frame and they defend it. And I just remember when I was younger, so many college dropouts I would run into, and they were some of the smarter people. It was like they were thoughtful. It was like, no, they have to explain to me why I need this degree to be able to think, right? And I'm just like, you're already beyond college. you're already asking questions about truth that are things that college, it would be a step backward maybe, right? For you to go to college.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but these people are seeking truth, and that's what made them so interesting to talk to, and what gave them such a good frame, because they're just like, hey, I know. A person with humility would say, I know I don't know everything, but here's my contribution, and it is how I see the world. And I think that a lot of businesses think about this. If you don't have a frame as a business, you're a commodity,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have a frame as a person, you're a jellyfish. You have no spine, and people are like, oh, they're fun to hang out with. They have things I like about them. Maybe they're funny or something like that, but they don't have a backbone. I'm not going to follow them, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, and so with brands, what you're looking for, and I think this gets to really the heart of the value of a brand, is that with a brand, what you're saying is follow me as I follow truth, follow me as I follow excellence in this. And you can tell I'm borrowing from a book. Um, uh, and so basically what you're saying is here's how to look at this industry. Here's how to look at this, type of service. And this is the best way. And I know everyone else is doing it, accounting, let's say, one way. They're thinking about it one way and how to serve people in accounting. We're doing it this way. And accounting, I picked one of the most boring, like nobody thinks of innovation when they think of accounting. But what you're doing is you're saying, we're not like service, integrity, more than the numbers. I just did a big report on the accounting industry. I'm working in the middle of it. And you're seeing the taglines and they're all the same. And they all say like, more than the numbers. And I saw 2 in a row that were like the same thing. We worry about your numbers so you can worry about your business. And I'm just like, they think they're being clever and they're predictable. They don't realize how common that is. What you're doing in the accounting industry, potentially the most boring industry, let's say, you're saying, but here's how to think about taxes. Here's how a small business like you should arrange your thinking around taxes. Here's how you should keep records. Here's the software you should use because it makes it easier for you to do it this way. But so now everyone's like, okay, they're seeing your emails, they're seeing your brand, they're seeing your way of thinking. And now who do you think they're going to go to when they need to switch accounting firms? They're going to go to the one that that made sense of everything, put everything in a frame, organized it. And now not only does it now make sense to you, but they make sense to you. Sorry, I'm moving. All right. As the client, a potential client, I'm looking at your company and I'm saying, you've organized everything for me. Everything makes sense. And now when it's time to move, you're the premium one. You're the one I want. Now, can I afford you? I don't know. You're the one I want. And there's no one that actually occupies that space in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught me how to think. You have kind of de facto monopoly power in my mind, right?
I often wonder how you manage to get through working in marketing. And also, I'm also completely amazed at how you were a university lecturer, which you mentioned at the beginning, and got out of that unscathed, it seems. You seem to have survived that because both of those environments lend themselves towards truth being some malleable thing that can just serve what's currently popular, especially marketing. Universities, to an extent, maybe the social sciences more than the STEM subjects, although even the STEM subjects as well are increasingly prone to this, which just blows my mind.
Yeah.
How is it that you've managed to sort of resist that onslaught, which must be relentless throughout these two areas? Because I don't know how you do it.
I think I'm autistic enough to where I'm like, well, everyone's concerned with truth, right? Like I can't understand anything but like truth. Like my epistemology is at the center of everything I do. So it's not like, oh, Chris is like a fun guy. He's a joker. He's like super easy to get along with. He goes golfing all the time. And, he's just like, that's not what I trade on. It's not what I've ever traded on. I've always been concerned with substance. And so it's like, that's kind of what I have to offer. And so I've always pushed through things with kind of a realism, mindset. And I'm just like, whether or not they bow to realism today, they will. It's just a matter of, I'm on the right side of history because I care about truth, right? And so I think that maybe that's kind of where that comes from. And, yeah.
Well, you're right. When you said at the very beginning, you said everyone does care about truth. When push comes to shove, all these fancy ideas about what's true go out of the window. When the police are knocking at your door at 3:00 in the morning, you want to know what it is, what the reason is. You want to know what the truth is. Why are they there? You don't want them to say, well, it depends on your perspective as to why I'm here.
Well, they're not going to say that. So
no, exactly.
That's not, yeah.
But what I mean is that everyone ultimately tries to find, it does rely on there being an objective truth when push comes to shove. And it's almost like, people feel as if they can play around on borrowed time.
Right.
But reality does bite eventually. And it only just is a question of, as you say, waiting things out. Ultimately, the truth always outs. I think Shakespeare said that. And I think it's very true. You just literally just have to wait for this fashion or fad to change. And that can happen with election campaigns, even change of leadership. And suddenly everything is reversed and people are taking the flags down and putting new flags up. And some people remember who were on the wrong side of that. And some people forget. But enough people remember for it to be damaging. And
Well, let me ask you, can I ask you,
yeah,
from a culture standpoint, is it possible? Gosh, I'm trying to make this short. Whenever I talk to my wife, I'm like, hey, it can't just be what I think and what you think. There has to be something outside of us that we can both examine.
yeah,
So if she's like, well, this is to this, right? She's making a qualitative claim about something. Um, I'm like, well, okay, but how would we know? How would we know if it's to that or not, right? So I'm trying to put it outside of us. Um, if when I go to work and I don't, things change, right? And it's no longer about competence. It's no longer about realism. It's no longer about a shared, well, I guess maybe that's my question. Like, can you have idealism, and can it be something that is something everybody shares as a value? So they can go to work and always be speaking the same language and know in the back of their minds that this conversation needs to move us closer to that ideal.
it's such a deep subject. I don't think so. I don't think everyone can share idealism and work together effectively because everyone is coming from a different point of view. In the words of Jeff Bridges from The Big Lebowski, that's just your opinion, man. And it really doesn't really help get you moving together as a unit. And unit obviously is part of the word unity, which according to Aquinas is one of the transcendentals. You have truth, goodness, and unity. And you don't really want a bunch of fractured, disparate parts in your organization, each with their own opinions on what the way forward is, and no one really getting behind each other. But the saving grace is that if every organization believes that, then you're pretty much fine because you're just rolling with everyone else who's going extremely slow. But there's a huge advantage to an organization which does accept objective truth. They can immediately differentiate themselves, immediately set themselves apart by trying to find an objective truth which everyone can get there to understand through reason, just reason alone. I mean, Aristotle has shown us how to do that, but he's not that fashionable nowadays. People like Hegel, for example, are much more popular because that's kind of like the philosopher of choice for university-educated people, and I think that we suffer from that. Their argument against that would be that look at all the progress that we've made in the past 50 to 100 years. We're living in unparalleled, unprecedented wealth, but really, are we? Are we happier? Are we better off? Are we working less? Do we have more expendable income? Are we really getting educated better? I'm not so sure, and it could be even better if we align with what's true and objective and good objectively. So I think that's a huge difference maker, and especially with branding and leadership. I think those leaders, just to go back to what we were saying, those leaders who do have a backbone, as you say, we remember them, we know, and they're often ultimately vindicated. It takes time. It can take 10, 15 years, but they come out looking better than ever, sometimes after they've passed away. But we remember. And those brands that stick to their guns, yeah, for sure, lifelong fans can be built around them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're So your thinking is that it would be very difficult to build a culture around idealism
Oh
because
yeah.
it's not really something that you can draw a picture of, put out there, or write that description, and then look at it, examine it for truth, and test it against other real things, right? Like it's not really subject to logic, which is probably why you brought up Hegel, uh,
Yeah.
because it's very it's a little more like it answers a felt human need, but maybe as a shortcut. It's kind of like, hey, my need is to be accepted or acceptable for all the parts about me, good or bad, which to me there's no definition because I'm a Hegelian, maybe, um, and it's all
Oh,
good because it's mine and I get to define it, and there's no right or wrong. And what I'm wondering is, with that point of view, so we go back to some of those fundamentals. I would even abstract. I think you said the three. You said there was truth, goodness, and
and unity.
unity, right?
Yeah.
And so you could even abstract those to truth and love if you really wanted to, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so depending on how you want to define love, and so now the Hegelian and the Platonist, or whatever, might
Realist.
say,
Yeah.
well, they might argue, they might be or the realist and the idealist might now say, okay, well, love means this, and then the realist might say, well, love means something very particular, like, and so
Yeah.
the
Yes.
idealist might say, well, if I love my clients, I want them to realize all the harm that America has caused, or whatever, right? Whatever the thing is, um, and so that we can, move toward, I don't know, reparations, or whatever the thing is, right? Whatever
Yeah.
their solution to the problem is. And then someone else might say, no, loving people realistically by a standard is, I want my employees to grow. I want them to be held accountable so that they can be stronger and stronger as we go. I want them to grow in their skills. I don't want them to make excuses all the time. I want my clients and customers to grow. I care about them. I want them to have stronger values, to be able to have a backbone, and to be able to provide for their families and create a strong foundation for their families. I don't want people running around feeling guilty because that leads to idealist thinking and not realistic thinking. And so that love, now has a definition. It is caring for people. It is wanting their growth. It is wanting their safety. It is wanting structure, right? So now they take on different definitions where the idealist might say, well, for me, it's this, for someone else, it's that, right? For me, it's all these good things. And for someone else, they need to be called out. And I don't even have to love them, right? Whereas on the realistic side, there's a standard of some kind where we can all look at and say, yeah, that's either good or bad. It's testable. And
Yeah.
it actually leads potentially to actually loving people in actuality. Whereas I would say idealism, you don't really know, right? Do you really know?
No, we don't really know. And also the problem is with the word, because idealist, it doesn't sound bad actually, because you want the best situation possible. You want the ideal,
Mm.
you know. Um, so the word itself is kind of misleading. It's an antonym for realism. But if you say that, idealism is bad to somebody who doesn't really understand the meaning of the word, how we're speaking it, they'll think, oh, Oliver and Chris don't want the ideal situation. They're not looking. Well, no, yes, we do. It's just that we want to approach it through a realistic frame, not through some idea of truth being subjective and constructed, and we negotiate this together. It's that's actually going to bring us away from the ideal situation. So I think that is a problem. Yeah, it does cause fracturing, and it does cause problems. Yeah, as I say, it would take quite a sea change in people generally to try to overcome that. Because as I mentioned, prevailing narrative is that truth is whatever we want it to be. We live in a liberal world where this has been conditioned over a long time. So yeah, I think it's a challenge, but I think that there are some organizations, especially Christian organizations, who do understand this and I think are the most likely to find a way out, or organizations who have Christian leaders. Their decision making is often based on Christian principles, even if the organization itself is not explicitly religious. And Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And it's not my truth or your truth, or we can talk about this. It's the truth. And so I think that a lot of this is going to have to come from individuals. I don't know what your view is, but if it's not institutionally embedded, I think that maybe individuals are the way around this.
Yeah, that raises a really interesting question about what's our role in an organization if we don't have the the power, and maybe not the right. Like, what's our right and what's our duty in a role within an organization?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think that's something we work toward, because I do think every person has to own that. They have to create their own frame that defines that for them, and that kind of determines their effectiveness for good overall in an organization, and their ability to assert that, which I would say is a responsibility. But at the same time, I don't want to worry about that right now. I guess the one big question I'd like to ask, because I think we're going to talk then about marketing and research next. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
If I were to ask one last question, and I don't know if it's a segue into marketing and research or not, but as realists, would we say love and truth are a balance? Like, oh, it's a balance, love and truth, or would we say you cannot? The two are intertwined. They're fundamentally the same.
It's a really good question. According to Aquinas, they're inseparable. And he defines love as, when we talk about love, we can say, oh, I love this. I love that jacket. I love coffees in the morning. I love my wife. I love God. I love that brand. We mean slightly different things, often very big differences between those meanings. But Aquinas defines love as charity, the highest form of love. The Latin would be caritatis. And it means love of your neighbor through God. And I suppose the most powerful way of seeing that everyone who's watching this might be able to relate to is when you choose your life partner, the person you marry. When you go to take your vows, you're saying that I'm going to love God through you, really, no matter what happens, no matter what goes right, what goes wrong. I'm going to continue to love this person through you. And it has to stand the test of time. But obviously, that doesn't really apply so much to organizations in the modern sense, is that people would recoil at that and say, well, that's completely different. But there are some similarities with that. Very often, an organization would see a customer or even an employee as being expendable, just replaceable. They have words for it: churn, attrition, customer success departments who overcome this, and very often they pretend, even the sales guys do this very well. They how's the wife? Oh, right, okay, how are the kids? And then when the contract gets signed, that all suddenly stops until, of course, a renewal comes up. And then it's all,
Right.
Actually, what's his name again, your son? Oh, it's your daughter. Sorry, I forgot.
Or let me check the CRM. I know it's in here.
Yeah, let me check Salesforce. And so it doesn't really, I personally think that, people are people, at the end of the day. And we all want to love and be loved. I know that sounds a little bit cliched, but it's just true. And I'd much rather give my business and my time and my commitment to somebody who not loves me, but genuinely cares about my well-being enough. So I know that I'm going to be treated well, treated with respect, be told the truth, love and truth are inseparable. You can't have one really without the other. If you have truth without love, it's bitter. And it's not necessarily for your, you feel as if it's not really for your benefit. It becomes less true in a way. And then if you have people sugarcoating, information to you, in a loving, caring way, but being a little bit economical with the truth behind it, that's not really love either. So they say that in heaven, there is no faith because you don't need faith because you can see God. There is no hope because you don't need to have hope because you're there. But there is always charity because God is love. And so that's a kind of Aquinas way of looking at it. Whereas here on earth, you have all three. You have faith, hope, and charity, and you're supposed to exercise all three of them. And so if it's necessary in heaven, it's definitely necessary on earth. And I think in every aspect of our lives.